The town of Havenwood was known for its peaceful atmosphere and close-knit community. Nestled in a quiet valley, it was the kind of place where everyone knew each other and nothing ever seemed to change. But one autumn evening, the winds of change began to stir, bringing with them a dark and malevolent force that would shatter the town's tranquility forever. Detective Samuel Carter had been with the Havenwood Police Department for over a decade. He was respected by his peers and loved by the townsfolk for his dedication and unwavering sense of justice. However, even the most seasoned detective could not have foreseen the horrors that were about to unfold. It all began with a series of strange disappearances. At first, they seemed unconnected, people vanishing without a trace, leaving behind no clues or evidence. But as the weeks passed, a pattern began to emerge. Each disappearance occurred within the same radius, and all the victims were last seen near the old, abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town. The mansion had always been a source of local legend. Built in the 1800s by a wealthy but reclusive family, it had fallen into disrepair after a series of tragic events. The townsfolk whispered tales of ghosts and curses, but few took them seriously. That is, until the disappearances began. One night, as the wind howled and the moon cast an eerie glow over Havenwood, Detective Carter decided to investigate the mansion himself. Armed with a flashlight and his service revolver, he made his way through the overgrown garden and up to the creaking front door. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the silence was oppressive. Pushing open the door, Carter stepped into the darkened foyer. Dust motes danced in the beam of his flashlight as he moved deeper into the house. The walls were lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow him as he passed. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, and for the first time in his career, he felt a pang of fear. As he explored the mansion, he stumbled upon a hidden passageway behind a bookcase in the study. The passage led to a dimly lit underground chamber filled with strange symbols and occult artifacts. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate mirror, its surface covered in a thin layer of grime. Carter felt a chill run down his spine as he approached the mirror. Suddenly, a movement in the corner of his eye caught his attention. He spun around, gun drawn, but there was nothing there. Turning back to the mirror, he saw a figure standing behind him, a beautiful woman with long, flowing hair and eyes that seemed to pierce his soul. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen, both alluring and terrifying. Before he could react, the woman spoke in a voice that echoed through the chamber. "Detective Carter, I've been expecting you." Her words sent a shiver down his spine. "Who are you?" he demanded, trying to mask his fear with bravado. "I am Lilith," she replied, stepping closer. "And this town is mine." As she spoke, Carter felt a strange compulsion to lower his weapon. Her eyes held a hypnotic power, and he found himself unable to look away. "What do you want?" he managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. Lilith smiled, a cold, predatory grin. "I want what has always been mine, souls. And you, dear detective, are the key to unlocking them." With a sudden, violent motion, she reached out and touched his forehead. Pain exploded in his mind, and he fell to his knees, clutching his head. Visions of darkness and torment filled his thoughts, and he realized with horror that he was losing control of his own mind. As the pain subsided, Carter found himself standing in front of the mirror once more. But this time, he was not alone. Reflected in the glass were the faces of the missing townsfolk, their eyes filled with despair. They were trapped, their souls bound to the mansion by some ancient, malevolent force. Desperate to free them, Carter tried to break the mirror, but it was indestructible. Lilith's laughter filled the chamber as she watched his futile attempts. "You cannot destroy what you do not understand," she taunted. "But perhaps you can join them." In a final act of defiance, Carter raised his revolver and fired at Lilith. The bullets passed through her as if she were made of smoke. With a wave of her hand, she sent him crashing into the wall, his body crumpling to the floor. As consciousness slipped away, Carter heard her voice one last time. "Welcome to your new home, detective." When he awoke, he was no longer in the mansion, but in a place of shadows and despair. The faces of the missing surrounded him, their silent screams echoing in his mind. He was trapped, just like them, bound to the will of Lilith. Havenwood would never be the same. The town's once peaceful nights were now filled with the whispers of the damned, and the mansion stood as a grim reminder of the horrors that lay within. And somewhere in the darkness, Lilith watched, waiting for her next victim to fall into her deadly web of seduction and deceit. In Havenwood, desire had become a fatal curse, and the line between life and death was forever blurred.